Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lani Diane Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lani Diane Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
Welcome to Still Pretty, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast from Chipperish Media. I'm story expert and hell bitch in orbit, Lani Diane Rich.
And I'm film scholar from a dimension of unspeakable torment, Noelle LaCroix, and we're here today to talk about Spiral, the 20th episode of Season 5.
Spiral aired on May 8th, 2001, and was written by Stephen S. DeKnight and directed by James A. Contner.
As we hope you know, Still Pretty is a fully spoiled Buffy podcast, and we're definitely going to be talking about the Buffyverse as it exists outside the boundaries of the episode. So if you're spoiler sensitive, consider yourself warned. Buckle up, kids. Daddy's putting the hammer down. In Spiral, we open where we left off in Tough Love, with Glory standing in the space where the wall to Tara's room had been, staring at Buffy and Dawn as she realizes that Dawn is the key. Buffy and Dawn run. Tara and Willow run. Willow throws a little magical goop behind to slow Glory down, but it doesn't because Glory has super speed suddenly because, fuck it, why not, right? Glory finally catches up with Buffy and Dawn, but only moments before the stealthy, silent, impossible to detect even at 5 paces Mack truck mows her down.
Last word, sleigh run? Just one. Truck.
Glory turns into Ben, who goes back home to change out of the destroyed dress and contemplates the fact that if Glory gets to Dawn, then he ceases to exist. But if he gets to Dawn first, all he has to do is kill a kid, right? How hard can that be? At Xander's, Buffy decides they can't fight Glory. It's time to run. Everyone gathers their things and meets on the street where an RV pulls up, driven and presumably stolen by Spike.
Buckle up, kids. Daddy's putting the hammer down.
Meanwhile, the Knights of Byzantium are gearing up to bring down the full fury of their medieval times LARPing group on Buffy and her friends as Orlando spills the tea that the key is a shiny little girl. On the RV, Giles is now driving while everyone else hangs out. Dawn goes into the bedroom in the back to talk to Buffy, saying at least it can't get any crazier, and at that moment, an arrow comes flying into the RV.
You know this is your fault for saying that.
The LARPers attack the RV, on horseback, wearing chainmail, shooting arrows, throwing spears, and stabbing a moving RV with swords. Spike grabs a sword sticking through the roof of the RV with his bare hands, because why the hell not, and Buffy rushes to the roof and fights the guy. Just when it seems like they've gotten the best of the LARPers, a spear flies through the windshield, impaling Giles. Because, sure, why not? They wander through the desert, wounded, with their second most powerful fighter under a blanket or he'll die, with not a single LARPer in sight until they find an abandoned gas station where they hole up for about 5 minutes before flaming arrows start flying into the place, and they're surrounded by LARPers who, I guess, just waited patiently for them to acquire shelter before launching their attack. The general, who, as we know, is always the first to run into battle, gets inside. Buffy knocks him out cold, Willow gets the magical shields around the place, and the LARPers are kept out. But don't worry, the power of the patriarchy will save you!
Witch's magic pales to the might of our God. The infidel's wall shall tumble before us.
Buffy tries to talk to the general, but he can't hear sound at the frequency of a woman's voice. And let's face it, even if he could hear her, he wouldn't listen. I mean, come on. She's a woman, and she's all, hey, why don't we think of a solution where you don't murder my little sister with her dumb woman logic? And how is he supposed to work with that, huh? So he just talks over her. The key is the link must be severed, I didn't get this tattoo on my forehead for nothing, blah, blah, blah. But then Tara starts shouting from the other room and Buffy rushes out to try to calm her down. Buffy talks with Giles, who lies on the counter slowly bleeding to death from his impalement. He tells her he's proud of her, and Buffy decides that she's not going to let him die, so she and Xander go out to the LARPers, and luckily Xander is able to talk to them in his man voice, which works at frequencies they can actually hear.
This is war, isn't it? And if there's one thing I've learned from Sergeant Rock is in war, there are rules. Or at least there should be, if you're as honorable as you think you are.
Buffy goes back inside and calls Ben, who rushes out to tend to Giles. He says he has to get Giles to a hospital. In the back room, Spike suggests to Xander that they make a run for it to Ben's car, and at least a few of them might survive. But Buffy says no. Spike and Xander leave, and Buffy talks with General Exposition, who explains that Gloria is sharing a body with a human. Dawn comes in and asks about the key. The General says the key will open the gates between all dimensions. The universe will fall into chaos and darkness.
Dimensions will bleed into each other. Order will be overthrown and the universe will tumble into chaos. All dark. Forever. That is what you were created for.
The General tries to talk Ben into killing Dawn, which Ben already kind of wants to do. We get a nice little fake out when Ben steps up behind Dawn with a syringe, but then he just injects Giles. And then Ben starts to turn. He screams to be let out, but it's too late. He turns into Glory. She kills Gregor by tossing a hubcap into his sternum, then grabs Dawn and rushes out with her. She punches through Willow's barrier, but it blocks Buffy from getting out. Willow drops the barrier and they rush out, but Glory is gone, and all the LARPers are dead. Buffy falls to the ground, defeated.
Buffy, you have to get up. We need you. Buffy, please. Buffy.
All right, Noelle. So here's the thing. We usually start out every episode of Still Pretty with me asking you how you felt about an episode. But if anybody couldn't tell by the snarky way in which I wrote this week's summary, I have feelings about this episode and almost none of them are positive. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time for anybody who loves this episode because there are parts of it that I really like. But for the most part, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes.
It's kind of terrible. So how do you feel about it?
This is clearly set up to be an important episode with important information, but I am so confused. I am just more confused. This is the episode where we finally kind of sort of get some explanation as to what the hell is going on with Glory, the Knights, the key, and so on. And I am so much more confused than when we started.
Yes.
Because the episode raises many more questions, for me at least, than it answers. And I'm left with a general feeling of, wait, what the hell just happened?
Right.
Everything about who Glory is, who the key is, and how it works, who the Knights are, and their role in all of this really should have been incorporated into the episodes leading up to this one. Like,
yes,
if we had been planting these seeds and leaving these breadcrumbs all along, I think we would have arrived at this point really feeling the weight of what's about to go down and the consequences if Glory gets a hold of Dawn, which she does by the end of this episode, instead of this general, like, confusion and chaos and tomfoolery and shenanigans. And I'm done. I have no idea.
What? It's a bad freaking episode. We've got this opening, which started with the ridiculous ripping off of the wall from the last episode, and it only gets worse. We have Glory just standing there staring at them, right? Then Buffy and Dawn run, and now Glory has super speed. She's the new Flash now, I guess. Like, we haven't seen this before, but she just moves so incredibly fast.
She has whatever powers we need in the moment, but then it never shows up before, and then it never matters after. It's just, here we go. This is what's going to happen.
It's nuts. And then we have Buffy picking up, like, for some reason they're running, and Dawn's like, I can't run anymore. And then Buffy picks up this ridiculous fucking Dawn doll and runs and it looks, why have her pick up Dawn if you're going to make it look that bad? And why have her pick up Dawn anyway? Because it slows her down. It doesn't matter that she slows down. She's being chased by the Flash. It doesn't matter how fast Buffy is. We know she's not super speedy fast. So there's no reason for her to pick up Dawn. And then we have this moment where Glory gets randomly hit by a truck as though she has all the powers of a god, but no environmental awareness. Are you serious?
It's a side effect of living in Sunnydale. You have no peripheral vision.
No peripheral vision at all, right? And then we get into the RV, which is, fine. Like, I could very much live without Xander's constant motion sickness.
Oh, God.
Because the
Seconded.
last thing I need is that heaving, that, like, dry heaving all the way through. That is gross. And as an empath, it makes me feel like I want to throw up. So knock it off. Nobody needs that. It doesn't serve any narrative purpose. It would have been fine without it. Then they're being chased by medieval knights, and let's just talk about that ridiculousness for a little bit. Like, I wasn't a fan of this whole thing earlier in the season when there were 3 of them. I'm less of a fan now that there's like 150. It's Southern California, and I get that chainmail, like it breathes, right? Whatever, like it's medieval cotton, but still. And the face tattoos, what? You guys never have to go to Target? Why are you getting face tattoos? Like, I understand the commitment of your order that you've got to find the key. But this has been hundreds of generations trying to, find the key and failing. You would think that these guys eventually be like, you know what? Most of our lives, we are not finding the key. That is actively what we're not doing for most of the time that we're part of this group. Right? So they got to do other stuff. They got to go to the 7-Eleven. They got to get gas. They got to interact in society. They got to have regular day jobs because who's going to fund all the chainmail? So, why are you tattooing your face?
I mean,
Nope. Right? Okay. Spears, arrows, horses. It's 2001. The highest speed ever recorded for a racehorse is 44 miles per hour. That's with a 100-pound jockey on its back, not some guy with 400 pounds of chainmail. And these are not racehorses. I don't know anything about horses. I'm figuring these are not racehorses because there aren't just like a lot of those lying around for these guys to pick up. And yes, Giles complained about how slow the RV was going, but still he's getting clocked by horses carrying 400 pounds of chainmail and dude.
And where are they hiding these horses? Like,
where?
Where? Okay. I mean,
that they got the horses. Not only that, they went and got the horses and then managed to somehow track this RV in the middle of the desert. And not only that, but like overcome it. The RV had to be moving at 10 to 15 miles an hour for this to be even remotely. I took, high school math. I know that if an RV is going north at 45 miles an hour, and then 150 horses with 400 pounds of man and chainmail on them are coming at them after, 20 minutes after the RV leaves Sunnydale, then in order for them to overtake them, how fast do they have to be going? Like 150 miles an hour. It's just not, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is stupid.
Well, and they could have done something with the Knights of Benadryl to make them like magical, but they're not. This is okay.
Well, yeah.
This is the thing.
If they had some kind of magical abilities.
They are clearly magic adjacent, right? Because
they have clerics,
right. And like these 2 dudes just show up.
They're D&D players. This is not. It's ridiculous.
Which, okay, but are they? It seems to me like the show wants the knights to be humans, but also just be able to magically poof into whatever space they need them.
Right.
But only for this episode. Gregor tells Buffy, he's like, yeah, we said we were going to come after you. And she literally says, took you long enough.
For serious.
And I'm
this
same.
whole thing is insane. Then they're holed up in this gas station, which is a part of this that I hated the least. There's all these fucking men saying that Willow's girl magic can't stand up to the will of their god. And I'm like, oh, shut up. And then Orlando's brain is magically altered. Clearly, he wouldn't want to live. And he's already told us that the key is a little girl. So he's like used his, usefulness, right? So Dante is like, the beast may have taken your mind, but I swear to you, she will never know the taste of your heart. Like, whatever. And then they kill their buddy.
Right? And okay, that moment, that moment's so confusing to me. Because
why?
It's played as like this mercy killing, right? That like Dante is not going to let the beast get his friend. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Yeah. But Glory isn't there. It's not,
and Glory's not coming for Orlando.
Like, I don't get it. And then like, why? So they take him out of the hospital. They take him out of the hospital because like no soldier left behind or whatever. What is their plan?
Because if he's going to die, we're going to kill him. What is this? This is nonsense. None of it makes any sense at all. It's all unbelievably stupid. And then they end up getting the general, and the general is always the one who rushes in first with the infantry, right?
Totally.
So like the general, like that's how this works. That's never how that works. So they've got the general. They call for Ben to help Giles. And I actually like that turn. Like I like that. Ben's a medical professional. He's a friend. They don't know that he's also the other half of Glory, but at this point they've worn out my patience so much that even though calling Ben in and having that turn where Ben turns into Glory and then that's how Glory gets Dawn. Like, I actually think that that's a good turn. I like that narrative turn. But at this point, like, I am so sick of Ben and his bullshit because he's terrible. I mean, like, the acting is terrible. The dialogue he gets is terrible. Everything with Ben is just dreadful. So like having him there, and it's a good moment, but I still like, because I have no patience for Ben, I'm done. I'm like, whatever.
Well, again, with the breadcrumbs all along, like you could have made Ben vexes me because Ben did not have to be terrible. I think
he
Ben's
really didn't.
Story is really
Ben
compelling.
Could have been sympathetic, yes.
Especially now. What the hell?
Right.
Like, what the hell? When Gregor tells the whole, like, the human infant connection to Glory, I'm like, whoa. Wait. So this was Ben's whole life, which I guess we had sort of suggested up to this point. But this was Ben's whole life. Right. How the hell did Ben figure any of this out? Like how?
Well, I don't even. And when did Glory start like breaking through? Did she not start breaking through? Because the general, when he was explaining it, was like, she just started getting more power and breaking through, and now we're moving up to the key. So blah blah blah. But I mean, this whole thing though with Ben is just so terrible. Like the scene with the minion in the beginning is awful. The dialogue is terrible. The acting is so bad. And we don't even take a moment of this justification where you could actually sympathize for Ben. If he's like, okay, look, I let Glory do her thing, she gets the key, she destroys the world, and I'm obliterated. Or if I can work myself up to kill one little girl, I can save everybody. If you get him in this philosophical space where he's trying to do this, this number counting idea of philosophical idea of like the maximum good, the utilitarian, like the way that Faith did, right? When Faith killed Alan, she was like, hey, I figure in the numbers, we've saved more people than we've killed, so we're all right. That is a very interesting and crunchy philosophical, very faulty philosophical space, but it's a space you could see Ben going into to humanly justify what would be a terrible thing, right? But we don't ever get that. He's just like, well, she wins, I cease to exist. But if I can kill this girl, and then the minion's like, but could you do that? Could you kill a little girl? And nobody's framing it in a way that actually would be philosophically interesting discussion to have.
And of course, it's our first feminine-voiced minion who goes all Lady Macbeth on Ben. It was never really your life anyway. Just kill a human, blah, blah, blah. Like, of course, it's like, meet a lady minion. And then she's A, the seamstress, and B, the one who's like tempting Ben over to the dark side.
Delivering the
Please.
poisoned apple, the one who's the
Please.
serpent. Like this, it's a very misogynistic role for this woman to be in, right? In
But
that
like,
moment,
of course,
you know?
it's a girl minion. Like,
Of course, the only girl minion we've had, right?
this is the level of like misogyny that we're dealing with. That like the one who has to be all like, well, you could come over to the dark side is, you know.
She puts it in his head. Could
Yeah.
you do that? Could you kill a little girl? You know, like, no, he should be the one grappling with this, because the way he's looking at, like, if he looks at it pragmatically, he can almost convince himself that he can do a very bad thing for the ultimate good, right? Because then it won't destroy the world and bring
Right.
all the worlds into
If
darkness, and like how many people are going to suffer. And Dawn's going to die anyway.
Right.
If Glory gets her way, right?
If it's the difference between killing a little girl who is arguably not actually a little girl and saving the world, or letting all of the
Right.
dimensions apparently bleed into one another and everything is darkness and hellscape forever.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I could see killing Dawn.
We can forgive Ben for pondering that question, but they don't give him anything even remotely. He just sits there and whines about this whole thing and doesn't like actually go into the space where he's making the argument for how he could, you know, kill this kid. I mean, it would still be wrong. I mean, it would be the fault. Like, what would be so much more interesting is if Ben was actually a good man who was in the middle of a fall, you know, because his existence was about to be wiped out and he's trying to justify the one thing that he can do to save himself, right?
Well, and it's such a great parallel with Dawn, too. Like, if it's like, well,
Yeah.
my body was never really my body at all, and my existence was never really my existence. It's
Right.
a nice, he could be
It
a nice
is.
foil to Dawn and the whole, like,
Exactly.
well, I'm not even really real anyway, am I?
Mhm.
So what is the
Right.
point of any of this? That would be
Right.
great. And they could
Give
have
him some interesting, crunchy stuff to do.
You could have that parallel running all season long, so that when you get to this moment that I just roll my eyes at so hard, when Ben's
Mm-hmm.
coming up behind Dawn and he has the syringe and is he gonna do it? And then no, he just
Yeah.
injects Giles. Like,
and just
it could have been really interesting and really meaningful
Mhm.
having Ben be one of the first to find out that Dawn is
Right.
the key, and
Yeah.
then have Ben have this opportunity to just end it all, just kill Dawn and
Yeah.
you know, end the whole thing. But they don't do that at all. We get
And they
this-
just fake us out as though he's not struggling
it.
with that at all. Yeah, no, it's because he's not struggling with that at all, because whatever he's injecting Giles with is clearly meant to make Giles feel better. So even if he had injected Dawn with it, it wasn't going to kill her. So what's the point? We're just like, we're doing this so that we freak us out, so that the audience is wigged out, like, oh my God, he's going to kill Dawn. You know, and it's nonsense.
it's unearned tension.
It is.
Because this is all, I mean, more or less, this is all
Mhm.
new this episode. We
Yeah. Mhm.
realized, oh shit, we gotta like explain all of the tension and drama that's happening
Mhm.
among Glory and Ben and the Knights and Buffy and Dawn.
Right.
We've got to like, we need to wrap this up into a high stakes kind of a, you know, showdown at the
Right.
Texaco Corral. It's like,
Texaco
there's
Corral.
gotta be like
Yeah.
I get it. I get wanting to raise the stakes and, you know,
Mhm.
build the drama in that way. But it's new
Yeah.
this episode and there's just not enough time. It feels thrown
Yeah.
together. It feels out of left
Mhm.
field. I mean, and not just
Yeah.
because we have, you know, the like entire LARPing community of Southern California like
and I'm
suddenly
not
show up.
mocking LARPers. I think LARPers are cool. Like, LARPers are fun, and people that play D&D, I am totally and completely
Oh, it's
in it.
rad. But
What
like,
I don't like is when we use that kind of, you know, like, that's what these guys are playing in this fantasy space when they're supposed to be real, actual, legitimate threats. And it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I think it's supposed to be scary that it all comes out of
Right.
nowhere. but it just feels contrived.
It is incredibly contrived. And here we have this wonderful, this heightened tension with Giles. Giles is clearly seriously injured. He could die. And we have this wonderful moment with him and Buffy, which I think is really ordinarily, I think I would be completely touched by this whole interaction with him and Buffy. But because of the ridiculousness, I can't even handle it. But I mean, he could die.
Yeah. Well, in that scene, I mean, that's Lani catnip right there.
Yeah,
that's
right.
the whole, I mean, and it really is, for me, it's the most striking thing about this entire episode is the apparent, very real possibility that we will lose Giles.
Yeah.
We're
Which is
used
a big
to putting
effing deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially because we are used to putting folks at the core, in the core cast, Buffy's friends, get in seriously dangerous, scary situations because that makes the story interesting. That tells us about the kind of heroes that everyone is. And it gives Buffy a little extra drama every week, which, that's great.
Sure. Yeah, that's always fun.
But prior to, I think, the end of this season, it never had this sense of permanence.
Yeah.
Part of that is the continuity. People who were injured a week or two ago are still injured.
Yeah,
they stay
Spike
injured.
Still has his eyes are still bruised.
Yep.
He's
And part of that, of course, is Joyce's death. I mean, she's really gone and she's not coming back, not even magically.
Yeah.
So when someone is sick or hurt now, we can't count on it being fixed. And that's a big deal. I mean, Tara could be completely dependent on Willow and the others forever. We don't have any leads on getting her back to her pre-Glory functioning.
Right.
Spike seems to have healed up some from having been tortured, but then he goes and he grabs the sword and
with
is
his
immediately
what is he doing?
That's actually great. That moment is really, really great. But it puts him out of commission again.
Yeah.
It effectively presses reset on having a powerful Spike to, maybe help in all of this. And I mean, and even a full power Spike has a chip in his head. So,
right, exactly. So he can't fight the LARPers. Right.
But then Giles gets this spear to the side and that's it. He's effectively out of the episode. And we cannot feel confident anymore that he's going to recover. And I think Giles's speech to Buffy even suggests that he thinks he might die. You're everything a watcher, everything I could have hoped for. And you can just hear the in a daughter subtext.
It's so wonderful.
So there. It's Lani catnip. It really is.
It is. I mean, it's love story, right?
Yep.
The love stories are the things that I come here for. And the Giles and Buffy love story is so central to all of this whole run of Buffy. It is such a huge part of it. And the idea of him in this role as her father. I love that stuff. That is ordinarily the stuff that I am so signed up for. And by the time we got there, my eyes were rolling so goddamn hard that I was like, whatever. Here we have Anthony Stewart Head doing his death scene, right? Which is a big goddamn deal in this. And I'm just, whatever. It's fine. I can't even with this. And then we call Ben in. And the Ben thing also. The Ben thing is actually a really good narrative turn. Of course, they're going to call Ben. He's somebody they know. He's in the medical industry. Ben should have been tending to their injuries before this so that we could seed this comfort with Ben being there, But, here we have this moment and it's great. It's actually narratively good. It's a good moment when it turns to glory. And I don't care at that point. Although I do like when Glory's like, hey, there's Gregor, and then tosses the hubcap into him. And now he's gone. It's so nice.
Glory, I mean, she's a delight. I love seeing Glory. Always. Pretty much always.
Yes.
Even when she's doing ridiculous shit. But yeah, it's
right. Well, aside from the speed running and the fact that she cannot tell a Mack truck is coming at her.
I mean,
yeah.
And if you wanted to explain that, I still don't understand how the Glory Ben thing works because she hits the car and then she starts, she's grabbing her head and she's like, not now, you idiot. It's clear that Ben and Glory are fighting for control of this body.
Yeah.
But that's never really explained. You know, like there's
No.
and what chance does Ben stand against a god?
Well, I mean, I guess like Rager says that she has to use all of her energy to maintain the body, to get control of the body. And so when she runs out of energy, and landing on a car after being hit by a truck, I guess would take a lot of energy, right? You know, that's the point where Ben comes back. And because her energy has been growing lately, Ben is getting less real estate in his own life. Like, you know, I get that. I think that there's so much good stuff we could have done with that. Aside from the fact that, oh, isn't it funny to see Ben in a dress? Like, that's what we do with this. Instead of these deep psychological and philosophical questions that we can ask about Ben's existence and how resentful he would feel over having to share that with somebody else, you know, there's so much interesting stuff that could be done with Ben, and yet it's not. And it's just like all of that is so bad that it almost, like, as much as I enjoy Glory, it like really kind of takes some of the sheen off of Glory for me, because the Ben part is so freaking bad.
Well, and I just want more, like, if you're gonna do the Glory and Ben thing, which I think is great and I actually really love, like, do it more. Like, really do it. Give us metaphysical Fight Club. Give us, like,
exactly.
You know, like,
I mean, my God,
come on.
Yeah, there's got to be some. I mean, you know, there's so much interesting stuff that can be done in that space, and yet it's not. And what I find, though, astounding in this is that even with as much as all of this episode, the stuff that I would ordinarily like, I cannot stand, I still love Spike. I love Spike through the whole thing. I love the goggles. I love Daddy's putting the hammer down. I love when he tells Dawn they should have gotten a faster car with just him, Dawn, and Buffy, and he could have gotten them out. I mean, he's just so there to protect Dawn.
I love that detail because it is so sweet. And also so heartless. Like, at the same time. It's
at the same time.
Just right there in front of everybody. He's like, yeah, it should just be you, me, and Big Sis, and everyone else. Right. Like, fend for
I would have gotten you out of here. He's exactly. Like, I don't care about these people enough.
Fuck
exactly.
all y'all. But also,
but like, he's all about the goal, though. The goal is to protect Dawn. He is there to protect Dawn, and I kind of love that.
It's Spike in a nutshell. It's so good. I'm with you 100%. The Spike stuff is
classic
great.
Spike. Oh my God, when Tara opens the blinds and gets the sunlight on him, and he is so kind to her, and he says it's okay, you can peekaboo with the sunshine as long as you want, I'm fine, it stopped smoking. Like, it's so incredibly sweet. And then I see a vampire, you know, a vampire with a soul is one thing, right? You know, but a vampire without a soul, but with real empathy. Like, how does that happen? Because this isn't just an extension of his love for Buffy that spreads out to her friends. I mean, let's not forget, 5 minutes ago, he was going to go with Dawn and leave Tara, Willow, Xander, and Giles to fuck all off, right? But he's in this moment. He sees Tara's vulnerability, and he responds to it with kindness. And I find that so fascinating. I love it.
He's got a soft spot for the I don't want to say helpless, but like, the less powerful. It's really interesting.
It is.
And it's in these tiny
moments.
It's in these tiny moments of him being so kind to Tara after she's
when it's not necessary. Buffy's not even there. He's not trying to impress Buffy. Like, this is the thing. It's just, it's his natural, this is how he responds. Tell her it's okay. It's fine. My hand stopped smoking. Like, he is caring about her and her experience in that moment, which I absolutely love. I love when Willow magically fixes the phone and he's like, handier than a Swiss knife. Look, the door to my crib has a nasty squeak.
Oh my God.
Willow just looks at him and walks away. She has no time for this nonsense. I love that. I love it. It's so cute. And when Xander goes into the back room with Spike and lights his cigarette for him because Spike can't, because his hands are so injured, and then they have this moment of connection between them. Oh my God, I love that.
It's real cute. It's real cute.
Oh God, I love it.
The bromance between Xander and Spike is possibly, I mean, it's pretty great. It's pretty great.
It is.
Lighting someone's cigarette for them is like like, we gonna fuck,
Yeah.
though. Like, that's... like, that...
It's a sexy thing, right? Yeah.
Just in movie shorthand. I'm speaking...
Well, that's how men used to pick up women in those movies before the 90s, right?
Right.
You know, he would go into the bar and he would light her cigarette for her.
And it looks, I mean, smoking's bad, kids, don't do it. But, like, it looks cool, doesn't it?
It does look
You just
cool.
lean
It does
over.
look really
And
cool.
he's... Poor Spike is so pathetic, too, with his two bandaged hands when he's, like, fumbling with his lighter.
He can't
and I'm
even
just like,
light his cigarette.
"Aw,
Oh,
poor
God,
little vampire.
I know. It's so poor little baby vampire, poor little vulnerable vampire. I love it. It's
But
so
then they
sweet.
do have this kind of, like fighting / bonding moment.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's really
No,
good.
it's really, they're having a real conversation and it's really nice. And Spike is confiding in Xander and saying, what we need to do is get out. Not all of us are going to survive, but we got to get, and I kind of love, his like commitment to this is that he is going to die protecting this kid. I love that. I think that that's just, it's all so good because he's a vampire. It's nighttime. He can be like, fuck all y'all and just bugger off like at any moment. But he's so committed to being part of this whole team, and I love that. And then we get into Buffy's collapse at the end, which honestly, I really do love. Buffy falls to her knees. She's completely defeated in the midst of a pile of dead bodies. And where we end in this episode, I'm like, all right, you got me back. Because, oh my God, that feeling of defeat and of I just give up. Ugh, it's so wonderful.
Well, yeah. And she said, her big struggle has been it just keeps coming.
Yes.
Lori, Riley, Tara, Mom. Like, she is so on the edge of defeat the whole episode.
She's worn out.
And then she comes out and it's just, she's done everything to, up until this point, really avoid death becoming the thing that follows her around. I mean, she's been grappling with that a little bit this season, probably more this season than previously. But here are all of these knights who we're still pretty sure they're human, right? Like, this is dead humans. And that for Buffy is a different landscape. That sounded like wordplay that I didn't mean to make. But like all of these dead, suddenly we have dead humans in a big way, and something about that again is like uncharted territory. That's a lot of dead people, and that's something that we don't really address. I mean, it's a big deal. Yeah, they're humans that we're going to kill everybody, and Dawn included, but they're still humans. And Buffy does kill some of them in the whole RV car chase, horse chase.
Aim for the horsies. Yeah.
Aim for the horsies. Yeah. But also, I mean, we see her hurl an axe into a man's chest.
Yeah.
And I seem to remember there being like serious, it was a serious moral conundrum when Faith stabbed Alan. But now Buffy is, and I get it, like they can't
There's
get
a
Dawn.
Self-defense argument.
Well,
like,
and they can't get Dawn because the world will literally end. But also,
but still,
it's a tough.
Killing a lot of humans is a tough thing. I mean, she could have knocked him off his horse, with the axe instead of burying it in his chest, and it would have, slowed him down enough, right?
I mean, yeah, and that's kind of again like one of those philosophical, lines that we're not really gonna go down.
We're not going to talk about. I mean, we've acknowledged that these people are human because when Spike tries to hit them, he gets a migraine.
That's right.
So we've acknowledged that.
They're definitely humans. They might be magical humans, but they're humans. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's so I find it's interesting. We have so many like really interesting, really crunchy philosophical like arguments to be made here and to be addressed that they just don't. They're just like, nope. And then that's it. And I find that really interesting. One of the things, though, that like I was thinking about with regard to this episode, and I'm about to like pose a lot of questions, but I don't think I have any answers because I don't think textually any of this was deliberate. I think it just sort of happened. I think a lot of it is due to terroir, but I find it really, really interesting. Okay, just to warn everybody, we talk a lot about patriarchy with regard to Buffy because there is a lot of that in Buffy with the Watchers Council, which is predominantly men, all men, when they raped Sinea, the first Slayer, and the essence of demons to imbue her with power, right?
Like you do.
As you do, right. I mean, this is very patriarchal. Yeah. The monks who put this power of the key into a little girl, all men. The Knights of Byzantium who come out to kill this little girl, men. Glory's ultimate power is contained by what? The body of a man. And Glory's victims, with the exception of Tara, all men. So what does this mean? We have this kind of separation of masculine and feminine power. Then we have Willow, right, who is the most powerful of all. She's the only one who can hold back the Knights. She's the only one who can even put a pause button on Glory, right? Mm-hmm. And her power is decidedly feminine. Like, witches are almost exclusively women in the Buffyverse, with the exception of, like, Michael, the kid who was part of the witch group in Gingerbread, Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of another man in the history of Buffy who was a witch. And, I mean, there was Rack, but was Rack considered a witch? Was that witch power? I'm not really sure. So the Buffy has men working with her, like Xander and Giles, but they're pretty much mundane. Giles has some magical background, but he was, way outpaced by Willow almost immediately and is really there for research and knowledge purposes, right? At this point. So within Buffy's world, the women are super, super powerful. Buffy is super powerful. Willow's super powerful. Tara's also powerful, Dawn has all of this power imbued in her, but apparently none of which she can actually access because she's just a helpless little girl, right? I find it all really interesting. And then we have Spike with his vampire power, right? But vampires are kind of the only, power group that is men and women. Not quite. I think we see more male vampires throughout the run, like the vampires that were killing in the opening sequence, or whatever.
Yeah, certainly.
They're more men.
Certainly the disposable, vamp of the week, we open in a graveyard and Buffy is fighting vampires. They usually appear to be male. Yeah. Right.
But we have Sunday from the freshman, the first episode of season 4. She had her whole crew. There were women in there. Darla, Drusilla. So we have powerful harmony. We have powerful women vampires that we see. I think more than any other power group in Buffy, we have more gender mixing within vampires than we do in any of the other groups.
Right.
So I find this all really interesting that we sort of have this very different take on masculine power and feminine power, where for the most part, it seems like masculine power is highly aggressive and feminine power tends to be more protective. Like Buffy, for instance, right? As soon as Angel has a soul, she doesn't kill him. He's murdered, just so many people. I mean, he's left a trail of bodies behind him. But as soon as he has a soul and he's not going to hurt anybody anymore, she's hands off. As soon as Spike has a chip and he's not going to hurt anybody anymore, shouldn't kill him, right? So Buffy is always about preventing disaster, preventing harm, but not about punishment and not about vengeance, right? It's protective in nature, right? Willow's throwing up barriers, right? She's not lighting all the Knights of Byzantium on fire. She's putting up barriers. She does protective spells. She locks Spike out of the house, right? So I don't know, I'm finding this, I see a division between male and female power, but I'm not really sure if there's an actual thesis to be drawn based on the text.
I mean, I think that some of that is probably, as you say, about terroir and the writer's room and what ideas, we as individual creators have about what does it mean for a masculine person to be strong or powerful versus what does it mean for a feminine person to be strong or powerful, and of course we're working within the binary because of course we are, because that's the only way that that is how we tend to deal in in our media, because
absolutely.
we're kind of narrow-minded that way. But really, I think there's a lot there I think there's a lot there about who is writing the show, more than any sort of deliberate, let's make a statement about what it means for women to be powerful versus what it means for men to be powerful.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything deliberate here.
No, like Glory is our first feminine big bad.
Yes.
Really. And she is hyper feminine. I mean, she is vampy in a femme fatale sort of way.
Yes.
And she mixes this kind of flirty sexuality with real physical violence. And that, I think, is supposed to, that's supposed to mix up with all of the flavor notes of our culture and our storytelling and make us go, whoa, she's serious business. She's serious evil business.
Evil business.
Yeah. But I think it is interesting and noteworthy that there is a protective kind of thesis over Buffy and Willow and Tara and, the women in the core group in terms of how their power works. I mean, Tara, when she's, when she is practicing magic, briefly as like self-protection, it's always, she's making barriers or she's putting up, is it Oz who's chasing her and she puts up like a smoke screen and then hides? It's defensive. It's not offensive.
Right. Well, when she did the worst, I think, spell that Tara did was the one where they couldn't see demons, right? And it was about protecting herself so that they couldn't see the demon part of her, without thinking about the inevitable consequences of that, But yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. It also seems like there are no lines that male power won't cross, right? Rape, killing children. We have Ethan Rayne's various forms of chaos, that he comes in and throws around. And feminine power is expected to adhere to ethical rules, like Tara's resistance when Dawn wants to raise Joyce from the dead, but Spike will help, right?
Yeah.
Willow's ethical response to power is pretty shaky, right? It only gets worse as we go. And Amy, too, seems to be of the why shouldn't we use power the way men use power? Like, but it does seem to be a line drawn between the application of the way that men apply power and the way that women apply power.
And again, I don't think they're saying a thing. But I think they're saying a thing,
Well, no, but our stories reflect us back at us, right? So whether or not the writers are deliberately doing something, this is something that textually, I think there's evidence that there is a different way in which we, in the Buffyverse, see male power and feminine power. And I'm really glad that you brought up the idea of like everything is so freaking binary. I mean, it's so binary that we can't allow Willow to be bisexual. Right. She has to be super she has flipped a switch and now she is lesbian. Like we have to have a box. Everybody in Buffy is in a very, very clearly labeled, gender and sexuality box. And that's just the material that we're working with, But that presumption about how male power is applied, how female power is applied. Female power has ethical restrictions on it, and male power does not seem to have that.
It's a really, really interesting distinction. And I'm like racking my brain for examples within the show that like don't fall in line with that. And I think, isn't that our struggle with Faith? Isn't that our struggle with Glory? Isn't that our struggle with Willow when she starts
in season
to
6,
use
Willow and Amy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when we see them start to behave, when we see Willow and Amy, when Amy puts dancing, half naked men in cages in the bronze, right? Magically, right? We look at that and we're like, oh no, that's super bad. That's super bad because these men are losing their dignity and their ability to consent to this activity. And yet, we have a bunch of these men raping Sinea with the essence of demons, right? In order to create the Slayer. We have men that put the Slayer through at the age of 18, a ritual in which she's almost certainly going to die. Because at 18, she's going to start to have power and start to think for herself and start to realize that this whole system is fucking bullshit, right? And fight back. And God forbid a woman should use her power, on her own terms. But I find these ways in which I think our cultural view of power and how it works seeps into the ways that power is discussed in this story. And I mean, the thing is, like, we have textual evidence a number of times. Buffy says, actually, in the text, it's about power. In Checkpoint, we just saw her do this whole run on it's about power. I have it. They don't. Season 7, we start with Buffy saying it's about power. Her final speech in season 7 is it's about power. And so there's a lot within Buffy that thematically is about power. So interesting to have them textually call that out a number of times. And yet the ways in which they talk about power, I think a lot of times are not consciously or deliberately done.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's a lot of the trope of the strong woman that is a woman who kicks ass.
Who fights like a man is a strong woman in a lot of these. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's a lot of that. And I think what starts out as kind of an interesting angle on the helpless blonde girl becomes like, the more you explode that out, the more you see the really, I don't know. How do I want to express, like, the framework is the same. Like, it looks like we're subverting something, but really it just fits neatly into these same gendered boxes about not just who gets to be powerful, but like what that looks like. What it looks like for a strong female character to be strong.
Well, see, this is the thing. Strong female characters, the way that everybody's so excited about talking about them in recent years, have been women that fight like men. Black Widow in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a good example of this, where we highly sexualize them, and we have them fight, and they're just as, look at them, they can hit just as hard as a boy, and then that's supposed to make them interesting, but it doesn't mean that as characters they're really fully developed. Now, Buffy, I think, is a very, very deeply developed character. And I think there's a lot of interesting things that we're doing with her. But the thing is that, like, Buffy got so much credit as like such a feminist show because we had a woman who was killing, boy vampires and all this kind of stuff. And I think that honestly, Buffy started out, I mean, this is my theory based on the text itself, is that Buffy does not feel like it was ever intended to be a highly, strongly feminist show. I think it was meant to subvert a trope. And it subverted that trope while still kind of adhering to a lot of anti and counter-feminist ideas, that are seated within our society. I'm not saying that everybody who wrote for Buffy was like this, a misogynistic, patriarchal, cheerleader. I'm saying that we live in a society that very much has a vested interest in maintaining power structures. And we see that in Buffy with feminism. We see that in Buffy with racism. We see that in Buffy in a lot of different ways, because the hierarchy of power is something that our society specifically, is very invested in maintaining. And so that gets put into us through our stories. And then we as writers reflect that back out through our stories. We reflect ourselves back at ourselves. So I'm not saying that this is something where the writers are such terrible people, or Joss Whedon, I think, was glad to take a lot of the credit for being a super feminist, when in reality, I am not certain that that's actually the case. But I think that what this story is doing is reflecting us a lot at ourselves. And what does it say about us as opposed to what does it say about the writers? I'm not interested in taking down these writers and saying, you're not feminist enough. I'm saying that our society's got a lot of work to do, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, I think it's always crucial to look at who is writing anything that you're engaging with. And not just whose name you see most often, but like who else is back there, you know, working on this thing. And in mainstream media, by and large, it's going to be white men. It's going to be white, cis, straight men.
Yes.
And this is why, I mean, this is why storytelling matters. This is why it's not enough that we have, you know, Dante, who is a knight of Byzantium, who's a black man,
right?
But who's just like a black man to be there.
It's
like
just,
he's
a black actor playing the part.
He is a black actor, and that is all.
And we are not acknowledging in any way, like, you know, him as an individual or as somebody who deals with racism. We don't see any incidents of racism within the Knights of Byzantium. We're not interested in developing out these characters at all.
It's very box checky. And I think that in mainstream media, a lot of times we see that with, you know, not just who's in front of the camera, but who's behind it as well. So it's like, but we had a woman in the writer's room. It's like, yeah, okay. Sure. Yeah. You know, and like,
right.
One woman,
I mean, and that's the thing. One woman is not going to be able to change everything. And one woman is not going to be able to see things from a lot of perspectives, not to mention the fact that we all have internalized various, you know, types of hatred, right? You know, we have like, you know, people who are queer have internalized queer phobia, and women have internalized misogyny because it comes from the society. It comes from who we are, you know? So society like embeds this idea in you. I mean, good God, one of the first things, those of us who are raised in any kind of religious atmosphere, we go to Sunday school and what are we taught? That Eve was tempting Adam. Poor innocent Adam was just sitting there. And then Eve was all like, oh, we got to listen to this serpent. I want an apple, dude. And then like it all is about women tempting men from the very beginning. From the time we are children, we are taught about these things, about the ways in which women are awful temptresses and vile, and they break down these poor men who cannot help but be tempted by them. Like there's a lot of that coming at us from the time that we're kids. There's misogyny within, you know, our culture. There's huge amounts of racism within our culture. There's huge amounts of ableism and, you know, and transphobia, homophobia, all of these things, right? It's in the water that we swim in every day, and it's hard to recognize. And when you take a step back and take a look at it, especially in circumstances like this, where we have this huge meditation on power, where they textually wrote a number of times, it's about power. And yet the ways in which power expresses itself in the Buffyverse, I think is super interesting, incredibly messy, and kind of supportive of traditional like systems, you know, hierarchical systems that we have of power in our society.
And also raises the question of powerlessness. Who has no power?
Yeah.
In this story. I mean, to bring us back to this episode where we see repeatedly, you know, something happens with Tara and we don't know what. And she starts to repeat something, or she starts to struggle, or you know, whatever it is. And then we'll cut back to the hospital, and here are all of these men who have been, you know, brain sucked by Glory, who are all strapped down. And it's this kind of like uniform destabilized masculinity. And they are, I mean, they're very, the word that's coming to mind is objectified. And I don't think that's quite right. They are this kind of scary, brainwashed unit. Yeah. And suddenly not human anymore, right? Like it's this, we are on this psych floor with all of these quote unquote crazy dudes who are all this like scary army of brainwashed, we don't know what, versus Tara, who is, clearly going through it, but is also like being held and being cared
Yeah.
for, and is, being like loved through this experience of, mental illness, essentially.
Yeah.
And wow, but that's a different take on powerlessness.
Yeah.
And the men are frightening. And I think they're frightening even before we get to this, this like strapped to beds situation. I mean, the first people that we see who are Glory's victims are men, and then how they move through the world once they have been, drained of their ability to function. They're scary. They are, I mean, they're harbingers of doom. They like leer at Dawn and tell her she doesn't belong. But Tara, who essentially has given away the whole thing by, noticing what Dawn is in front of Glory, is still like loved and cared for, and somehow remains innocent question mark in all of this. It's an interesting, it's just an interesting division of powerlessness, and like what that looks like, and what it looks like, what it means to be, I don't know, incapacitated, destabilized. There's not a good word for what I'm trying to say, but I mean, just contrast Tara, being spoon-fed with Orlando. Is it Orlando being stabbed in the gut
through the heart?
Like what? What
the hell is that about? Like what is that? Yeah, I don't even know.
If it's about power, it's also about powerlessness, and like who is worthy of.
Right.
I don't know. It's a mess. It's
a mess. No, that's the thing, is that nothing is consistent, right? Because then we have Dawn, right? Dawn, who is the key. Dawn, who is apparently so hugely powerful that the most powerful being in the universe, Glory, is chasing her down for her power. And yet she cannot access any of it. She is just a little girl. She has this tremendous power within her, and it never occurs to anybody, including, I believe, the people writing the show. What if Dawn was able to access? What if Dawn actually had control over herself, right?
Right.
But she also has a uterus, and we all know what that does, right? Because it makes you unable to control or interact with or, take over your own physical experience in the world, right?
Oh, shit. I just had this flash of Tara as hysteric and what it means for a woman to be quote unquote crazy, as opposed to, anyway, that's a different
That's
rant
a whole, but that's a fascinating,
podcast.
Right? That's a fascinating discussion, though, too. And anybody who is interested, just go look up the history of hysteria, because goddamn, right? It's very, very interesting. And yet, Dawn, who is arguably the most powerful of them all and ancient, has absolutely no access to that power at any point in this whole thing, and that I find. In a story that is ostensibly that states textually to be about power, there are questions about power that it is really not interested in answering, and I just find it so fascinating. But I have nothing, because you take all the textual evidence and it contradicts itself, and it doesn't really land us anywhere that feels complete or like a thesis of any kind.
Yeah.
It really just kind of reflects our own messy relationship with power, and with who has it and who doesn't, and who is allowed to have it and who is not allowed to have it. It's so weird. But anyway, so Noelle, my question for you though is, what are you wearing?
I mean, gender studies 101 moment. Not that we kind of haven't already been doing that.
Yes.
I've talked about this a little bit, but I just want to bring it up again because I find it fascinating. Ben in Glory's clothes is a joke.
Yes.
Right? Glory in Ben's clothes is still a viable threat. When he transforms and then she's standing there in his, his
and she
sweatshirt
holds it up over, like, baring her belly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of,
she's still threatening. That doesn't take away, being in quote unquote male clothing doesn't take any power from her.
Right.
And also, she's kind of sexy. Or is that just me? Like, it's,
oh no,
it's a good look, but
yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to get into a huge discussion of the gendering of clothing because that's neither my area of expertise nor is it the focus of this podcast. But when we talk about fiction and visual media showing us who we are as a culture, this is the kind of tiny detail that I'm talking about. That a man in quote unquote women's clothing is a joke and a woman in quote unquote a man's clothing is still like a scary villain and oh shit, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I think she's scarier in Ben's clothing, right? Her clothing is meant to, like, highlight her femininity, which is an undermining of power, right? What are women wearing? Women are wearing high-heeled shoes. You know what that does? That makes you not able to run fast unless you're apparently the Flash, like Glory or whatever. But, like, women's clothing, like, I'm always talking about how is Buffy out there fighting vampires in those high-heeled boots? My God. Right? You got to chase people. You got to run. Like, high heels are not conducive to moving quickly, for most of us, right?
And that's the point.
Yes.
Like, if you are wearing high-heeled shoes, regardless of your gender, you are not expecting to be doing anything athletic.
No. When you need to run, you put on sneakers, right? I mean, like, or very least flat boots, So I find that whole thing just fascinating. But Noelle, tell me, what is your favorite part?
Oh, gosh. My favorite part of this dreadful, confusing episode.
Yes.
Okay. It's the Spike Xander bromance.
Oh,
I mean, the fact that these two claim to hate each other so much, or I guess it's Xander who claims to hate Spike, but then they have this kind of soldiers in the same army camaraderie. I mean, it really works for me.
It's sweet.
It also works for my love of screwball comedy. The idea that if they hate each other, they're going to end up together in the end.
Yes.
And despite calling Xander shrimp under his breath, is just
to make him
delightful.
sick. Yeah. No, it's kind of sweet. And I love that relationship. I love all of it. And I love the fact that, like, a couple of weeks ago with the Buffy bot, right? Xander was like, no, I understand. He's well muscled. He's evil. I can understand why you want to sleep with him, right?
Yep.
Which I think is very nice. For me, my favorite part of this episode was when Spike was so kind to Tara after she set him on fire. It is such a beautifully human moment expressed through a vampire, which I fucking love. But it speaks to the incredible power of kindness, which after our discussion on power, I think could use a bit of a spotlight. The power of kindness, I think, is one of the most powerful things that you can exude, that you can engage in every day. And it is so incredibly powerful, especially when everybody is in the shit, as we are all right now, deeply, deeply in the shit. It's a nice way to express your power is through kindness. And I love the fact that Spike does that with his power.
If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to join in, connect with the show on Twitter, follow @Chipperish, and use the hashtag StillPretty.
This episode of Still Pretty was brought to you by the Chipperish media producers who support us on Patreon at the power producer level. These people are the reason why Still Pretty is coming to you free and ad-free right now, so thank you to our August producers: Abigail, Alice, Erica, Rose, Jonathan, Kristen, Sarah, and Shelley. And this week's special message for our power producers: who's up for some tasty fried meat products?
To find out how you too can support Chipperish Media, visit patreon.com/Chipperish. Other ways to show your support: write a great review on Apple Podcasts, tell your friends about the show, or aim for the horsies.
We'll be back next time with The Weight of the World, the 21st episode of Season 5. Until then, at least things can't get any crazier, right?